weather was good. And I hope
that is out and find a draft. But
I don't know whether
are you going to?
मेरे सारे पासपोर्ट ड्राफ्ट हो रहे हैं. I don't know whether
We had some joint In fact,
that's why, especially
the new post of
So this is Santosh Jha's division, and you're one of the new recruits. I'm so glad. We'll go back to academia. So, you know, think tanks
जो सबसे पहले तो इन्हीं था शुरू मगर उसके बाद से इतना कुछ हो चुका है.
He requested if we could. He said if you could start, but we can't really start because if we start, he is the main speaker in the in the event. So. Minister, we are not but we will start in about 5 minutes.
It is my pleasant duty to extend a welcome to you and thank you for coming. A very special welcome to our principal speakers for this opening session, His Excellency Ambassador Takeshi Yagi and the Honorable Shri Suresh Prabhu, Union Minister of Railways. This event, as you may have seen from the documents, is being organized by the Strategic Studies Program at ICRIER in partnership with the Embassy of Japan. And may I just take 10 seconds to say that the Strategic Studies Program at ICRIER focuses on the critical issues impacting India's emergence as a major economy and the key strategic partnerships that accelerate India's rise as a regional and a global power. Now, looking across the expanse of what was described by Prime Minister Abe in 2007 as Greater Asia, which is the Asia between Japan and India, there is no relationship more important or with greater potential than the one between India and Japan. It is termed a special strategic and global partnership precisely because of its capacity to transform the well-being of our respective peoples and the future peace and prosperity of Asia in the 21st century. The last bilateral summit held in September 2014 had laid out an ambitious vision for accelerating inclusive development in India, particularly by transforming the infrastructure and manufacturing sectors, doubling FDI and the number of Japanese companies operating in India over the next 5 years, and realizing 3.5 trillion yen in public and private financing from Japan over the next 5 years, which totals roughly $32 billion. Against this background, this conference provides a timely platform to assess progress in India-Japan economic relations just prior to the next bilateral summit due to be held in New Delhi in December 2015, just a few weeks from now. Now, finally, railway modernization is one of the priority goals of the Indian government, and our dynamic minister, Shri Suresh Prabhu, has recently paid a successful visit to Japan. We thank him for joining us here this morning, and we look forward to hearing from him some of the major outcomes on railway cooperation likely to emerge from the summit next month. Without further ado, over to you, Rajat.
Thank you, Ambassador. Let me quickly, not waste too much time, just echo what the Ambassador has said. Extend a warm welcome to all of you who've come from far away, including, of course, from Delhi, and also warmly welcome the Minister for making it here, and the Ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Yagi, for coming to this bilateral meeting organized by ICRIER and with support from the Embassy of Japan. The Ambassador has already said the need to have synergy and the kind of complementarities between India and Japan. Japan is set to join the TPP. There's lots of changes in the global landscape. There's a demographic decline in Japan. There's a demographic bulge in India. We've started so many initiatives with the new government in place, the Make in India, the Skill India, manufacturing needs to take off, employment needs to take off. With Japan looking for overseas investment opportunities, with Japan looking for investments with their expertise and technology, and India needing all these, there's a huge demand in India for technology, there's a huge demand in India for investment, and I think Japan and India, if I'm not wrong, can be natural partners in the development process of India as we look to modernize our economy, which is modernized in parts, but it needs to be much more pervasive. And I'm really glad that ICRIR has been organizing bilateral meetings with Japan. As you know, we have a Track 2 dialogue also that we do with Japan, and Japan has been, as the ambassador said, a strategic partner, and ICRIR is extremely proud and privileged to be able to play a small part in this process. So thank you all very much for coming here. I'm sure we'll have very productive sessions. We have, as you see from the program, we have 4 sessions. One is, as I said, Make in India. Then we have infrastructure and connectivity. We have the role of IT services. And then we have how do you finance all of this growth in India, including for infrastructure. So we'll have all these sessions, technical sessions, during the day, and I'm sure they'll be very productive with your participation and also interaction. Before wasting more time, let me invite the ambassador, His Excellency Mr. Takeshi Yagi, to deliver his speech. Let me also say that he has an illustrious career. He's part of the diplomatic corps in Japan. He's had an illustrious career. He served in many nations, all the advanced nations, including the United States, Germany, and in the OECD. And he's now in India and looking after Bhutan as well. He's completing his 3-year tenure in India, and his stint and his stay in India has been extremely productive and successful. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for coming, and may I request you for your opening remarks.
Okay. Honorable Mr. Suresh Prabhu, Minister of Railways, Ambassador H.K. Singh, Dr. Rajat Kathuria, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my great pleasure to be here today to address the conference, the India-Japan Economic Relations Bilateral Dimensions, organized by ICRIR. This conference is taking place at a very auspicious moment of bilateral relations, which have been strengthened through annual alternate visits by our prime ministers. As Ambassador Singh has mentioned, it's our turn. I mean, it's our prime minister's turn to visit India, and I hope it will take place in the very near future. And in the meantime, I have learned that Prime Minister Abe and Prime Minister Modi had a brief interaction in Turkey, in Antalya, during the G20 summit, and they will certainly have another couple of interactions, encounters, maybe in Malaysia when they meet at the East Asian summit. So with these preparatory steps, I hope that Mr. Abe's visit to India will be even more successful than the previous prime ministerial visits. And I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to Ambassador H.K. Singh and his colleagues of ICRIR having taken the initiative to organize this event. Let me start with briefly reviewing recent developments in economic relations between our two countries. At their meeting in September last year, we agreed, the prime ministers agreed on this big target, Japan-India Investment Promotion Partnership. The content has been already explained by Ambassador Singh, so I don't go into the details of this target. And you might be wondering, how much or how far we have come in terms of this 3.5 trillion target. Recent figures show robust Japanese investment, Japanese FDI in the first half of calendar year 2015 is estimated to be 1.1 billion US dollars. Some might think, this is not so much as had been expected, but do take note that, it's just 1.5 years after this new government took over, and it is very hard for FDI to be actually, taking place in such a short period of 1.5 years, and perhaps particularly for the Japanese companies, their decision making is a little bit more cautious than Indian companies in particular. However, I should also mention that when we aggregate announcements made by Japanese companies in the past year, so that means after Prime Minister's visit, on large investment in India, it is already close to 13 billion US dollars. So this number is quite encouraging as a leading indicator to a Japanese FDI into India. So we're quite certain that this 13 billion US dollar will be translated into the actual FDI statistics in the coming years. At the same time, we have to bear in mind that this 3.5 trillion yen is a shared target to be jointly achieved by both Japan and India. Prime Minister Modi underlined his determination to further improve the business environment in India, including through tax, administrative, and financial regulations in order to boost investment. And in this regard, of course, we appreciate the activities of the Japan Plus team in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and we are also impressed with various policy initiatives and encouraged by reforms undertaken so far. And we are keen to see more reform measures to be put in place on the ground. On the ground is a very important part, so that investors are even more convinced and attracted to India. To name a few, for Japanese companies, taxation reform, relaxation of financial regulations, and infrastructure development are high priorities. Infrastructure development is, of course, very important, and I stress this point in light of the presence of the Honorable Minister of Railways. The topic to be discussed today, namely manufacturing, infrastructure, and connectivity, IT services, and finance, are most relevant for India's growth story as well as Japan-India economic relationship. I strongly believe that Japan can significantly contribute to India's efforts in these areas, and I hope this conference will provide valuable inputs to our future collaboration and for the immediate future to the successful Prime Minister Abe's visit. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you, Ambassador Yagi, for those opening remarks and setting the context. It's now my proud privilege to welcome the Minister, Shri Suresh Prabhu, Minister of Railways, for his opening remarks. I would encourage all of you to please have a look at the speaker profile of the Minister in your booklet and witness I'm not going to read out all his accomplishments, but you see that he was one of the youngest ministers in the erstwhile government of NDA. He's been Minister of Industry, he's been Minister of Power, he's been on several committees, including the Committee of Interlinking of Rivers. He's got a variety of interests in the social space. He's involved in education with NGOs, and he's of course widely traveled, and he's one of the most recognizable faces in this government, and it gives me absolute pleasure and a delight to welcome him to this India-Japan bilateral conference, and also to say that, in a listing of or a ranking of ministers that was done earlier, he was ranked as the second best performing minister in the government. So he's been widely recognized as being very dynamic. As I said, he was one of the youngest ministers in the erstwhile previous NDA government, and he continues to display that energy in his current role. And on behalf of ICRIER and behalf of all of you, welcome him here, and also wish him all the luck in the good work that he has started. Thank you, Minister, for coming.
Excellency, the Ambassador of Japan to India, Mr. Rajat, Ambassador H.K. Singh, and all the distinguished friends. Let me first of all apologize because I was thinking that the program is already on. That's why I called the Ambassador, because I was on a conference call, which went a little longer because some of the very important global issues we're discussing. And that's why I thought I'll come at 10 so that my session will, normally otherwise I always go on time as never. So that's why, sorry that to keep you waiting, because I was thinking that the session is already on. Anyway, so good morning to all of you. And I congratulate Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations for organizing this event on the eve of a visit of Honorable Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Abe-san, in the next few weeks. This is a very special relationship for India. With Japan, we have many things in common, and we have many things to learn from each other, and there is tremendous scope for working together for mutual benefit. As we always know, in any bilateral relationship, the two things are very important. One is commonality of interest, and other is whether we have any contentious issue with each other. One is a negative aspect, other is a positive aspect. Luckily, with Japan we have no contentious issues at all, and therefore the only way we can look at it when we have these bilateral summit talks is not to find out how can we mitigate the negatives, but there is only one energy that we can focus on as to how we can leverage the positives. And therefore there is a tremendous scope of working with Japan in many areas. Japan is the third largest economy of the world, was second largest for a long time, and third largest economy has many things to offer to rest of the world. They have the technology, they have the work culture, they have the ability to put together the entire global supply chain and to make it happen at the right time. So just in time is only part of it. But a country which lacks most of the natural resources has become global hub for producing finished goods from what is required as an input from natural resources. So therefore there is many things one can learn from Japan and one can benefit from Japan. India has a tremendous opportunity today because it is now becoming one of the fastest growing economies, and as IMF even predicted yesterday that India's growth trajectory would be only on the upward one for a long time to come. And for many reasons India will grow at a much faster rate. First, there is a tremendous domestic demand which yet needs to be fulfilled. There is a huge investment that is needed in infrastructure which will spur the demand for so many other ancillary activities. There is also a base which is not as high as Japan but still very strong, and therefore there is a tremendous scope that we can use it as a launching pad for bringing India into a much higher growth trajectory. And to make that happen, we did many things in India. One is obviously the kind of technology that we would need. We would also need the managerial ability of the Japanese companies. We also need the market that Japanese companies can offer not only to India but also to the rest of the world through India. This is something which we have not yet explored fully, and therefore we look forward to this relationship in a very positive way. Our Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi and Abe-san have a very close personal relationship, and as we always know that relationship between two countries are important, but personal equation with two leaders is even far more important. And therefore, we have seen that relationship has really grown in the last 1.5 years. It is not just the bilateral visits by Indian Prime Minister to Japan or Japanese Prime Minister to India. They have been meeting each other bilaterally on many international forums, including a G20, I think there's a meeting. So I think all the time there have been interactions, and we have been sharing our ideas on bilateral issues as well as global issues. Because nowadays that has also become a very important dimension of any relationship. Because when you look at what happened in France the other day, no one can say this is an issue related to France. No one can say it's an issue related to only Europe. But this has a far more bigger implications on global scenario, and therefore we have been discussing a lot of issues with Japan on many occasions. As Ambassador mentioned, I was in Japan recently, and I had a very good meetings with the Prime Minister, obviously, the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for METI, Minister for Health, Mr. Shiozaki-san, the Minister for Economy, of course, he's a Minister of Deputy Prime Minister, is also Minister of Finance. Also one more minister I met. So we had a number of meetings, and also large section of Japanese industrialists and many others. And I could see a tremendous opportunity now that exists between our two countries. And we want to find out ways of developing that to mutual benefit. And no relationship can ever succeed if it is not for mutual benefit. So like Japanese have many things to offer, India has also many things to offer to Japan. So therefore there is a mutuality of interest which can be fostered to benefit both the countries immensely. Talking about railways, we already had realized that railways could play a very significant role to develop this bilateral economic relationship. And therefore one project which was already going on to make Shinkansen, the JICA had already made very recently made a feasibility study. But as you know, there are not just railways, as Ambassador knows. That's why whenever the Shinkansen delegation comes, they also meet Ministry of Finance, they meet Ministry of External Affairs and others. So we decided to fast track it and to put it to take a good final decision. We have put a new mechanism which is examining this and try to take it to the next level, which is again incidentally was a suggestion of JICA report itself. JICA had suggested 4 points of operation, so this was the first point, and we already decided to act on that. Second point which I suggested, actually 3 more points which I suggested to my Japanese counterparts, and they willingly accepted it, is to expand this relationship in railways cooperation in many other sectors. So now we have decided to work with Japanese Research Institute, and Indian R&D is going to be a very critical sector. For the railways, investing into research and development is very important, but just to start research and development ab initio, disregarding what has happened in other places, particularly in our friendly country like Japan, would have not been a good idea. So I suggested we have a cooperation on that front, and now we have decided to move on that. This is the first time we'll have a very close cooperation between the Japanese research organization in railways and India's research organization of railways called IDSO in Lucknow. So this will be a very significant step. And I suggested small little things. Of course, we want to work on research in a very big agenda. We already I had given them points about at least 20 points, I think, which we can work together on research. And the Japanese are examining it. I think there has been a very significant, interesting development. When I went there, I suggested these four points which I'll mention now. Immediately after that, and in fact this was not sent to them earlier, I just broached this topic when I met the Prime Minister and then subsequently all the business leaders as well as the ministers. On the last day of my visit, which is the second day incidentally, the Prime Minister's office called all the concerned officers dealing with all these ministries, and all as if they were taken the minutes of this meeting, because I was just speaking extempore. Each of the point that I mentioned was taken as a point for action, and that was recorded. And within a week of that, there was a delegation which came from Japan to India to follow up on this. And since then, there have been 3 delegations which I visited. So I just visited maybe about 7-8 weeks ago. And since then, there have already been 3 or 4 delegation visits. And those visits are as a follow-up for many of these ideas that I mentioned. And I think even tomorrow, your advisor, Prime Minister's office, is here, and I would be going. And in fact, on Friday, Ambassador has invited me to be the chief guest for a very important day in Japan's annual calendar. So I'll be there also. So this was the point that we mentioned. So one was Shinkansen, second was this research. Third I suggested was why not we use many other sectors in which Indian Railways are going to make investment. We are making $142 billion of investment in the next 5 years. We are already in the process of